Okay, everyone. Hello, welcome to this online talk. So my name is LUSTRE. I'm the principal investigator on the LUSTRE project. So for those of you who don't know LUSTRE, it's actually so the title of the project, the full title is Unlocking Our Digital Past with Artificial Intelligence. And basically what we want to do is to apply AI to records, to archival records, and we are particularly interested in government records. So we are working closely with a range of project partners, including the Cabinet Office. So thank you so much to our project partners who have really helped us a lot with this project. So today we are very happy to welcome Mhairi Aitken, who works at the Alan Turing Institute. So basically, she's an Essex fellow, an Essex research fellow in the public policy program, and her background is in sociology. So she looks at social and ethical dimensions of digital innovation, and really part of her role is to give talks. So we are very happy to have her here as part of this series of talks. It's actually our second online talk. So basically, if you're interested in the project, I really encourage you to have a look at our website and to join our listservs if you really want to know more about our next events. We are going to organize another online talk next month, and also we have a workshop in May. So the easiest way to keep updated is really to join the listservs. So I'm going to put the link in the chat. Hopefully you can see the chat on your side. And basically after the talk, we will have time for questions and answers as well. So the title of the talk today, hopefully you can see Mhairi's slide, it's Establishing a Social License for AI, Addressing Ethical Considerations Through Trustworthy Practice. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome, Mhairi. Thank you.
Thank you, Lise. Thank you, everybody. I'm really pleased to have been invited to speak today. As Lisa said, I'm an ethics fellow at the Alan Turing Institute. The Alan Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science. And so my work as an ethics fellow is looking to explore kind of ethical and social considerations around the ways that AI is designed, developed and deployed, and also around kind of governance and policy or regulatory responses to AI. And so today I'm going to talk about establishing a social license for AI. And I'm going to do, I guess, to cover a few things in the next half an hour or so. And I'm going to introduce what it means to establish a social license for AI. So what the concept of a social license is, why that's important for AI, and what it means to pursue a social license for AI. But before that, I'm going to focus on why AI ethics is important. Why there's this a great deal of interest around ethical considerations relating to AI currently, and I'm going to set out why that's so important and what are some of the kinds of considerations that need to be taken into account in pursuing ethical approaches to AI. The title of my talk included developing trustworthy practices or pursuing ethics through trustworthy practices. And I'm focusing on trustworthiness rather than trust, because what I think is really important here is thinking about the relationships that underpin trust in AI and what it means to demonstrate trustworthiness in the way that AI systems are designed, developed and deployed. And so I'm going to be talking about what that means in relation to pursuing a social license for AI. And finally, I'm going to finish by providing some reflections on future directions for what I think is important in terms of ethical practice and developing ethical best practice in developing and deploying AI systems for record management or record access. Okay, so beginning with why AI ethics, why AI ethics is an important and timely topic to be discussing. I'm sure that most people on the call are aware that AI is increasingly playing important roles in all areas of our lives and really impacting all areas of society. So AI, while it may not always be obvious, or it may not always be transparent, AI is shaping the ways that we interact with services across all areas of our lives and all areas of society. Everything, as these graphics on this slide are aiming to illustrate different areas of our lives where AI has a role, perhaps not necessarily the immediately obvious what these illustrations relate to. But the first one with the key is meant to convey the increasing role of AI in shaping decisions, including access to finance, so decisions about who gets access to a mortgage, who gets access to finance. AI is also being used in the private sector in advertising and targeting and personalized advertising, and having quite transformative impacts on the ways that we shop both online and offline. And it's also being used very widely in the public sector, in everything from medicine, diagnostics, healthcare, through to policing and education, and across a wide range of sectors. So we see that AI is increasingly having significant impacts in all areas of our lives and across all aspects of society. So it's really important that we meaningfully engage with ethical considerations around the ways that AI systems are designed, developed, and deployed, and the impacts that they have in our lives. Now, of course, there's also a great deal of interest in ethical considerations relating to AI, because there have been, no shortage of public controversies or examples of controversies relating to the ways that AI systems have been developed and are being deployed and have impacted people's lives. And we see a recurring theme in media coverage or public interest relating to AI in controversial uses or controversial applications of AI systems. And the examples, the illustrations on this slide are all kind of public sector use cases of AI systems that have been developed and deployed. And so the first one being the off-qual algorithm, which was used to decide on to determine A-level results when exams were cancelled during the lockdown. The second example in a slide being facial recognition technologies, and there's a great deal of controversy around the ways that facial recognition technologies are developed and deployed and being used, particularly in policing, and that these systems have inequitable impacts on members of the public who are impacted by the deployment. And finally, the final example on this slide it relates to the controversy around Google's DeepMind's involvement in a project to develop a diagnostic tool using NHS patient data. And this is an example which shows very clearly the concerns around the ways that AI systems are developed and deployed, and particularly around commercial or private sector involvement within those processes. And so there's a range of ethical concerns around the ways that these systems are developed and deployed, and that these have the potential to lead to significant public concern and public controversy if they're not developed in ways that align with public interest and public expectations. So following on from this then, that's kind of the reasons of why ethics has become, or some of the reasons why ethics has become a really important area of interest in relation to AI development and deployment, particularly in public sector or by government. So what then is AI ethics, or how do we approach AI ethics, and what does it mean to take an ethical approach to AI? The first thing to be really clear about is that ethics is not the same as legal compliance. So in many cases, AI ethics, or taking an ethical approach to AI, requires us to go beyond legal compliance. So while the law or our regulation sets out, what we must or must not do in terms of collecting, processing data, and what we must or must not do in terms of deploying AI systems, ethics requires us often to go beyond legal compliance. It's not so much about the questions of what we must or must not do, but instead about the questions of what we should or should not do. And those questions don't have straightforward answers. They are often more complex, more challenging to answer than the questions of what we must or must not do. And also when we're asking questions about what we should or should not do in terms of developing or deploying AI systems, those questions tend to have different answers depending on who you ask. People in different positions, different organizations will have different perspectives on what is the right thing to do in terms of how AI systems are designed, developed, and deployed. So these ethical questions don't have simple solutions, but they require continual negotiation and continual judgment to decide what is the right way to develop AI systems, what are the right contexts in which they should be deployed, and what are the limitations around the ways that they should be deployed. But what's really important as well is that getting it right is not just about avoiding negative impacts. And I think often discussions around AI ethics are often conceptualized as being primarily about anticipating potential negative impacts or anticipating potential harms and seeking to avoid those negative impacts or manage negative impacts. And it's often conceptualized in that kind of negative risk management way. But ethics is also about maximizing the value of digital innovation. And an ethical approach to AI is about maximizing the value and benefits of these technologies, of these systems, to maximize the value across society and to seek to create positive outputs which are equitably distributed across society. And so that's really important when we're thinking about AI ethics. It is partly about anticipating and mitigating negative impacts or harms associated with AI, but it's equally about maximizing the value and maximizing the benefits of these technologies and systems across society. But when we think about the kinds of concerns or considerations that we're grappling with and thinking about ethical considerations relating to AI, there are broadly two broad groups of concerns or considerations relating to AI systems. And these have been classified as being epistemic and normative concerns. So epistemic concerns are concerns that relate to kind of the design or the inner workings of the AI system. So that relates to for example, issues relating to the data and the algorithms that are underpinning AI systems. So epistemic concerns are things like, are there biases within the data that is being used, or the data that is being used to train an AI model? Is data accurate and up to date? And is it possible to scrutinize the data or decision-making processes? So epistemic concerns require responses that demonstrate rigorous and robust approaches to designing and developing AI systems, and also require transparency to enable scrutiny of how those systems are being designed and developed and what the impacts of those processes might be. Normative concerns then relate to outcomes and impacts on society. So how are these systems being deployed, and what are the impacts, what are the implications for society, and to what extent are these equitable across society? And just to illustrate that distinction, to draw on an example of predictive policing algorithms. Now, predictive policing algorithms are algorithms which are used by police forces to allocate resources, to decide where to allocate police officers by predicting where crime is likely to happen in the near future. And these are designed, developed based on historic policing data, and they are controversial. And partly that controversy relates to the ways that these systems are making predictions based on historic policing data, which contains historic prejudices within policing decisions. And that is an epistemic concern. The data or biases within the data that is used to train these models lead to biased or prejudiced decisions and outcomes. But there are also normative concerns around the ways that these systems have been deployed and the decisions that have been made about what context or for what purposes in which to use these systems. So, for example, predictive policing algorithms are mostly used in relation to street crime or gang violence, and not, for example, white-collar crime. And that is a social decision. It's a decision that reflects a certain set of values, presumptions, and preferences on the part of the organizations or the people who are designing or deploying these systems. And these are normative concerns. And this distinction between epistemic and normative concerns highlights that, if we're thinking about an ethical approach to AI, it goes far beyond the technical considerations of how a system is designed and developed, to thinking about the social implications and the social values that are shaping how these systems are deployed and for what context or for what purposes these systems are deployed in. And this really brings me into then thinking about, or it brings in to consider what it means then to have a social license for AI and AI systems. So yeah, to take a bit of a step back and say, well, what is a social license? A social license recognises that there can be meaningful differences between what is legally permissible and what is socially acceptable. So, as I said when I introduced AI ethics, this is about going beyond legal compliance or complying with regulation, and legal standards to align with public values, societal expectations around what is the right thing to do and how AI systems should be developed to maximise their value within society. So a social license is not a fixed or a legal document. It's not a contract that states what you can and can't do, but it's an intangible, unwritten sort of agreement or relationship between stakeholders and an organization. And so social license is granted by a community of stakeholders, and it's essential for the sustainability or legitimacy of particular practices or industries, particular practices or industries. So in the case of AI, a social license would be an indication that the ways that an AI system has been designed, developed, and deployed aligns with public values, aligns with societal expectations, and will be supported by members of the public, by society. Developing and maintaining a social license requires public engagement and incorporating diverse perspectives and interests. As I said, when it was setting out what ethical challenges or ethical questions might be, there are very different interests and very different answers or ideas about what an ethical approach would be, depending on who you ask. And a social license requires us to engage with the diversity of perspectives and diversity of interests to develop approaches to AI which reflect those diverse interests and values within society. And it requires us to go beyond professional communities to ensure that current and future practices are aligned with the values of society. So that's kind of broadly what a social license is. And then the next question is, how can a social license be established, or what would it mean, or what approaches would be required to pursue a social license for AI? Essentially, a social license is underpinned by relationships of trust. As I've said, it's not a legal contract. It's not a fixed agreement in terms of how an AI system can be developed and deployed, but it's about building relationships with stakeholders, with impacted communities, with users of systems to ensure that those systems reflect and align with stakeholders' interests and values. One thing that's really interesting when we think about social license for AI is who those stakeholders might be. The concept of a social license originates in extractive industries. So the origins of the concept of social license comes from extractive industries like mining or forestry, where companies were seeking a social license for their enterprise, primarily through engaging with communities who were impacted by those industries. So that was mostly meant local communities defined by proximity to those extractive industries, communities who were impacted by the operations of those companies and seeking to meet their expectations of how those industries should proceed. But when we think about a social license for AI and we begin to think about who would be the stakeholders to engage, who are the impacted communities that we want to engage, often, very rarely, physical proximity to a development or to an operation is largely irrelevant. Instead, we need to think about, who are the impacted communities of the ways that we develop AI systems, and particularly thinking about AI systems to process or retrieve or summarize digital records. We might think of stakeholders as being either the people from whom the data is derived, so the data that is used to train the models, or the people from whom data about their lives might be processed by those AI systems as essential to the functioning of those AI models. If this is using data about people's lives, they're impacted by the way that those systems are developed and should be involved in processes of thinking about how those systems are designed, developed, and deployed. But equally, we can also think about stakeholders as those who are impacted by the ways these systems are deployed. And so thinking about how an AI system might inform decision-making about public services or allocation of services, and how that might impact people's lives or communities. And these are stakeholders who should be involved in thinking about what it means to have a social license for those practices. So when we're thinking about stakeholders or impacted communities in relation to AI, it's perhaps less straightforward than if we were thinking about this in an extractive industry where there's a community or place or people who are proximate, close to the locality of a development. But we need to think about it more in terms of who is likely to be impacted by these systems and whose data might be used in designing and developing those systems. But importantly, establishing a social license requires us to engage meaningfully with public interest and public concerns, and to ensure that where concerns are raised are relating to the ways that a system is designed or developed or how it might be deployed, that those concerns are meaningfully addressed. This isn't about managing public concerns or providing reassurances in relation to public concerns, but it's about providing meaningful opportunities for members of the public, for impacted communities to express their interests, raise their concerns, and for those to be meaningfully addressed in the design and development processes and the ways that AI systems are developed and implemented. So fundamentally, a social license requires meaningful public engagement to build relationships with impacted communities or potentially impacted communities, and to build trustworthiness or ensure trustworthiness within those practices. So taking a bit of a step back, there are different reasons why we might want to engage stakeholders or wider members of the public in relation to design, development, and deployment of AI systems. And these different rationales reflect different reasons for engaging, but also lead to different approaches or different ideas of how we should engage, who we should engage, or for what purposes. And broadly speaking, these are three kind of main rationales that underpin approaches to public engagement, and that can underpin approaches to engaging stakeholders or potentially impacted communities in design, development, deployment of AI systems. Firstly, there are normative rationales, and a normative rationale follows that if we're using people's data to develop an AI system, or if we're developing a system which is going to have impacts in people's lives, then simply it's the right thing to do to involve them in those processes. Kind of a democratic responsibility to involve people as far as possible in processes that affect their lives or which relate to data which comes from their lives. A second set of rationales, sort of an instrumental rationale, would see that engagement is about meeting a particular goal. So instrumental rationales often lead to kind of tokenistic or tick box approaches to engagement, but would see engagement as being a way of perhaps increasing support for a particular project, or enabling or avoiding opposition to a particular project or to developing a particular system through engaging people within those processes. As I said, that kind of instrumental approach often leads to a tokenistic efforts at engagement, or tick box approaches to engagement. Conversely, the last set of rationales, substantive rationales for engagement, see engagement as being fundamentally about adding value within design, development, deployment processes. Substantive rationales see engagement as being about improving projects, improving their outcomes, and leading to benefits, not just in terms of the project or the AI system, but also benefiting members of the public who participate in those processes. So having benefits for participants and for wider society. And this is really the kinds of rationales that lead to approaches aimed at establishing a social license for data practices or for AI. A substantive rationale would lead to approaches to engagement which are seeking to meaningfully reflect public interests within the design, development, and deployment of AI systems, and to have benefits for wider society, leading to AI systems which are more relevant, more sustainable, more likely to have positive impacts within society. Now, often the question that I get when I speak to people about public engagement relating to AI or involving members of the public and impacted communities in development processes relating to AI is, well, when should you engage? And often what we see very often is that members of the public or stakeholders are engaged very late in the process. So they're often engaged once an AI system has been more or less fully developed at the point when it's going to be deployed. And that's really too late. At that point, really important questions have already been answered. Really important decisions about what the system might look like or what purpose it might serve have already been answered. And so it's really important that when thinking about engaging stakeholders, engaging potentially impacted communities, that engagement happens throughout the AI lifecycle and happens at all stages. And at all stages, there's real value in involving or incorporating diverse perspectives and diverse interests. So, for example, in the design phase, where we're coming up with the initial questions of what this AI system might look like, what purpose it might serve, and what it might do, there are really big questions that can valuably engage with insights from wider communities and potentially impacted communities. Questions like, what are the problems that need to be solved? Like, fundamentally, why are we seeking to design an AI system? What is its purpose? What's its purpose going to be? What needs is it aiming to meet? But then also, who might benefit or who might be impacted by the development, and how can their interests be included? And this is where it's really valuable to engage with potentially impacted communities, to bring them into the design process and to ensure that from the very earliest stages that AI systems are being designed that take account of the needs, interests and experiences of potentially impacted communities. Moving on to the development phase, there's real value in engaging stakeholders and in potentially impacted communities in thinking about what data might be used to train an AI model, what data is needed, but also what are the limitations in the current data that is available. So is available data representative? Does it contain biases? Does it omit certain important experiences or perspectives? Does it overlook the experiences or perspectives or interests of particular communities and particular groups? And what could be done to address those omissions, or to make that data more, to make the data sets more accurate, more inclusive? How can we anticipate, or how can we amplify the positive impacts, the benefits of these AI systems, but also identify and mitigate potential negative impacts? And of course, this is really important to be considering throughout the whole AI lifecycle, and to be engaging with diverse perspectives. Very often what we find when AI systems have been shown to produce inequitable or harmful outcomes is that these inequitable outcomes or negative impacts or harmful effects of AI systems are experienced inequitably across society. But often what we find is that if we talk to people who are experiencing these negative impacts, they'd often say, well, if you'd asked us in the design process and the development process, we could have told you that would have happened. That was clear. But because certain experiences or perspectives are not represented or not included within the design and development process, those negative impacts have not been anticipated. So it's really, really important that we have diverse perspectives and diverse interests included throughout design and development phase to anticipate potential risks or potential harms, and to ensure that there are measures in place or mechanisms in place to mitigate and address these. When it gets to the stage of deployment, again, there's real value in bringing in diverse perspectives to explore what the contextual factors are that will affect how the system operates. Many times AI systems might be designed and developed with thinking about particular contexts, but are then deployed in a different context, which leads to a different set of ethical considerations or potential impacts. And it's important that these are anticipated before they're experienced in the real world. It's important to consider who are the full range of potentially impacted communities, how an AI system might be deployed, and to seek to engage them throughout the process to anticipate the potential impacts, but also how these can be addressed. It's important to have systems in place to monitor and evaluate impacts of AI systems, and that should involve potentially impacted communities or impacted communities in those processes of monitoring and evaluating those systems. And finally, evaluation should be something which is ongoing and built in throughout the AI life cycle, but that should involve impacted communities in all of these processes to identify whether positive impacts are being distributed equitably, whether more could be done to ensure that the benefits of AI systems are distributed equitably across society, but also to identify what unintended negative impacts might be arising and how those can be addressed, but also how the system can be improved to be made more beneficial. So these are obviously there's many, many more considerations that could be added onto this slide, but this is an indication of some of the range of important ethical considerations that need to be addressed throughout the AI lifecycle, and that these require us to engage with diverse perspectives and diverse interests. Clearly, these are all tricky ethical challenges and dilemmas which can't be resolved purely by technical expertise or from within the professional or technical expertise that is typically found within within development processes. There's much value in reaching beyond professional and technical expertise to include insights from impacted communities to understand how AI systems are likely to be impacting communities once they are deployed and out in the real world. I'm going to skip over this slide because I think a lot of this has been covered in the previous slide. And so just to count some closing reflections around what this means for thinking about the ways that AI systems or AIs is likely to be used increasingly in managing and accessing digital records. It's really important that we take account of ethical considerations around the ways that these AI systems are designed, developed and deployed from the earliest stages, and think about the range of the diverse perspectives and interests in terms of how AI systems are designed, developed and deployed. It's crucial to anticipate the potential negative impacts or risks of how these systems are developed at an early stage in order to ensure that they are anticipated, in order to ensure that there are appropriate mechanisms in place to mitigate and address potential negative impacts. But it's also about engaging with ethical considerations at the earliest stages to ensure that these systems can have the widest possible benefits and positive impacts across society, seeking to maximize the societal value of AI systems for the future. I think the approach of establishing or seeking to pursue a social license provides a really positive, constructive approach to pursuing AI ethics, and one which encourages us to look well beyond professional and technical expertise to seek to align with societal values and societal expectations to ensure that AI systems can maximize the value and maximize the benefits across society. Ultimately, pursuing a social license for AI will lead to AI systems, AI models, which are better designed, which more fully take account of the range of societal values and interests, that are more likely to be seen as appropriate, more likely to be socially acceptable, and more likely to be sustainable, as we're taking account of the contexts in which they're being deployed. Ultimately, as I've said, there's no simple solutions to ethical challenges around the ways that AI systems are designed, developed, and deployed. But pursuing AI ethics, pursuing ethical approaches to AI will require continual negotiation and continual judgment on what is the right thing to do in different contexts and different circumstances. And it's important to approach it in that way, as something which is ongoing, as something which is continuous, which requires us to continually rethink or revisit what are the how we can maximize the value of AI as we think about it in different contexts affecting different communities or different groups. We may have to change our approaches and revisit what is the answers to those questions of what we should or should not do. But as I said a few times now, what's really important when we're thinking about AI ethics is that this is not just about anticipating negative impacts or managing risk. It's also about proactively seeking to maximize the value and the benefits of AI and maximizing the value of digital innovation across society. And again, I think that's where the approach of pursuing a social license, seeking to align with diverse values and interests across society, provides us a real opportunity to creatively think about what it would mean to maximize those values across society. What does it mean to ensure that the benefits of AI and digital innovation are experienced equitably across society? And how can we ensure that we are aligning with societal values and societal interests to really maximize the value of innovation? And that's where I will stop, but I'll be really pleased to take any questions or comments that you may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mhairi. That was absolutely fascinating and very balanced as well. It's not, everything is evil about AI or everything is positive. We need this balanced approach. So thank you so much for this.